Hello, virtual TrekCon. Welcome to the Treksperts briefing room, where industry professionals curate audio commentaries with the creators, creatives, and diehard fans of the Star Trek franchise. My name is Peter Holmstrom. I'm a screenwriter and author here in Los Angeles. I have a couple of Star Trek short stories that are appearing now in Star Trek Explorer magazine.
And I'm Lisa Klink. I was a writer for Star Trek Voyager and Deep Space Nine, and I also have several stories in Star Trek Explorer magazine.
For the last 6 years or so, Star Trek has been seeing a heyday of animation, whether it's Lower Decks having a comedy series, Star Trek Prodigy seeing new elements of the Star Trek universe, or the rumored Star Trek preschool series that they're working on right now. Animation allows for many new types of creatures and worlds to be shown that would be prohibited in live action content. However, this is not to say there hasn't been other heydays of Star Trek animation, my personal favorite being the Star Trek animated series from the 1970s. On today's show, we have the authors of Star Trek, the official guide to the Star Trek animated series, Aaron Harvey and Rich Schepis. Thanks for being here, guys.
Hello.
So, did you guys watch the original animated series when it aired?
I remember, I was like 3 or 4. So I started, and then it reran in the 70s a lot. So I watched it then.
It's pretty much the same with me.
Was this your guys' kind of first entree into the Star Trek world?
You want to go, Rich?
Sure. It's I think I started watching Star Trek in a syndication with my mom. She's the one that got me into it, and then just getting up Saturday mornings with my brother and, turning on the cartoons and, seeing Star Trek on television as an animated form. That was pretty cool. So I'd watch that too. But yeah, it was I think it was the live action that I remember seeing first. And I had the Scotty Migo doll back in the day. So I remember that. Him and my Steve Austin Bionic Man would battle a lot. So.
Who won?
Scotty can fix the Bionic
Scotty,
Man.
of course, because he was a miracle worker. He would take the Bionic Man apart easily.
Yeah. Cool.
Well, guys, I mean, I'd love to ask first though, because for me growing up, like in the 90s, the animated series was always seen as kind of a I don't know, I don't want to say urban legend, but it was a bit of a holy grail in ways for Star Trek fans. Like, it existed, we knew it existed, but we also knew that Roddenberry had said it's not really canon, whatever. And so there wasn't even a listing for a while on StarTrek.com about it, right? It just sort of was this vague thing that happened. And then in the teens and especially with the release of the Blu-ray set, I think 2017 or so, it really came back into the public consciousness, and this coincided with your guys' book. You talked to us a little bit about the early inception of this great coffee table book that absolutely everyone should go pick up right now.
Well, it's funny because Aaron and I were both working on Trek Movie, and I remember reaching out to Aaron. I was thinking, all right, I would, everybody wants to do a book. Everybody does, especially involved with Star Trek. And I was thinking, all right, what's going to sell? And looking at all the CBS's stuff, and I was still good friends with Mike Johnson, who worked with John Van Sitters and wrote the comics, and now he's working with Star Trek Online. And we were talking about it, and what haven't they mined from the original series? I felt like it was the animated series. So my first call was Aaron, and I was like, Aaron, because Aaron ran his podcast, and he was the animated series guy. And I was like, and I loved his design work. And I said, Aaron, we got to do a book. And, we put Aaron's pitch, I wrote the pitch and Aaron designed everything. And
which we learned was Mike, not the norm, which was interesting.
Mike said,
you normally get a piece of paper with just a paragraph or two about what you want to write. And we had actually mocked up a chapter and wrote down basically the index, and they're just like, this is so well organized. They were just totally baffled. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah, I didn't think of any other way of doing it, because it's such a visual book. And John, we sent the email, and John responded within an hour. And I was like, wow, this is pretty cool. And then he was just like, take up to 10 years.
Yeah. It's like, it could be 10 days, 10 weeks, 10 years or whatever. Basically, don't contact us. We'll contact you. And then he contacted us a beat later. It was like a week, something like that.
It was actually, I think it was like
a month,
a little bit. Yeah, it was a little bit longer, but
very short.
Kevin Toyama was an editor at Weldon Owen, and he called Risa Kessler, she does publications for CBS Star Trek, and he said, "What do you got for us?" And there was a big push in Discovery, understandably, and he wasn't really interested in Discovery. And he says, "What else?" And she says, "Well, we have this project on the animated series," and he says, "Done." And he reached out to Aaron and I. And Aaron, how long did we talk to Kevin the first time?
Couple hours, wasn't it? Like
I think so.
It was just like this. It started out with sort of the details, and then we just went into like a 2-hour conversation about the animated series and Star Trek in general. So I think we really gelled that way too. So we knew what they were looking for. They understood us. So I think it was really good to be able to do that. And he was just like, congratulations, you're writing a book. Also, condolences, you're writing a book. Like all the positive and negative things. Yeah, right. That was hilarious.
We got the approval right before Christmas of what was it, 17, Aaron? 18? I'm sorry about that. We published in 19, so I think it was 18.
Oh, sorry, I was like year. Okay, yes, yeah.
And it took Weldon Owen and CBS about 7 months to agree on a contract, and we couldn't do anything, and we
should have, but we did. Yeah, I know. Yeah.
We wanted to get
because we knew that it was going to be very work intensive once it actually started, because we knew this would be like the one shot to do a really good animated series book. So I wanted to make each chapter not exactly templated and stuff, which now in retrospect was a dumb idea because it was just really, really difficult, but it turned out well. So that was, we just knew that there was just going to be a lot of groundwork, even not just the copy, but just everything putting it together.
We all benefited from Aaron's pain, just so you know.
It's such a great book, and I think what's interesting to me about it is you're not just incorporating interviews with current people that worked on the show or current experts or whatever, but you're also incorporating a lot of the artwork from the show and a lot of like your own art, of course, but like there's elements. I imagine you must have been given pretty open access to some of the CBS archives or something like that.
CBS themselves didn't have virtually anything. We had a couple like slides that were scanned. We went to Roddenberry and they had some stuff, but it was a pay to use it sort of thing, and we had no budget. We basically, it's like, we're doing this book, and it's like, okay. Right. There was a photo of the original cast like recording or pretending to record at Filmation, and the LA Times wanted to charge us $500. We just didn't have $500 to drop on a photo, so it's not in the book. But we found somebody who actually worked on the show, Bob Klein, and we had you on I think FaceTime, right, Rich, when we did this. So I went over to his garage, and he pulled out just boxes of stuff. Amazing. And was just going through a table. We're just like, it was like, oh my gosh, this is the holy grail of all of this stuff. And so, it was amazing.
Without Bob Klein, there's no book. Because it's an animated series book. It has to be visual. It can't just be,
you can
text.
do some screenshots, but that's only goes so far.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, Bob Klein and then Fred Bronson, without those two, and Fred was the publicist on the show, there really is.
Oh, yeah. His articles that. Yeah. Do you want to tell them about that? The ones that were probably never published.
So Fred was the publicist for NBC at the time, and huge Star Trek fan. There was a lot of them out there that no one really knew. And when Fred heard that there was an animated series, Saturday mornings, he treated it like a primetime show. He interviewed Matt Jeffries, he interviewed Gene, he interviewed Magil, interviewed Nichelle, Margaret Harmon. And, these multi-page press releases went out to the newspapers, to run along with copy on the episodes and the show. Odds are, because it was a Saturday morning cartoon, no one probably ran any of those things. So it was a treasure trove that had never been seen. I mean, the interviews we have in the book probably were never seen. And if they were, it was 45 years ago. So we were able to fill in a lot of gaps that we would not have had.
We had Matt Jeffries talking about drawing the animated starship. I mean, like was crazy because like where are we going to find that otherwise? It's just it was very cool.
Every time in the book where you see said in a 1973 interview, that is from Fred Bronson. So just so you know, so you'll see that with a lot of the old castmates and cast members and things like that.
Yeah, did you find anything that really surprised you?
It was interesting. I think it was nice to see the Margaret Arman and Nichelle Nichols interviews talking about Nichelle finally getting on the bridge. And it's just like Aaron said, the Matt Jeffries, even Gene was going on about how animation allowed them to do so many, especially 1970s television, alien landscapes. He always wanted to do volcanoes,
lava. Yeah, exactly. That was his thing. Like as long as we have lava, it'll be great. It's like, okay.
We have an underwater episode. We had Shatner's rock monsters in it. And then characters like Eric's and
Maress,
right. So those things, and Gene was all about that. He was very excited about those things. So that was cool because there really wasn't anything out there that had Gene, and again, like you said, Peter, there was all these urban legends around the show, and Gene wasn't really high on promoting the animated series for whatever reason. So there wasn't a lot of positive things out there by Gene. So this was
we knew later in life why that was too, because basically he had his Maislish, his lawyer kind of whispering in his ear that he wouldn't be taken seriously if he was connected with animation.
Right.
So that, and the fact that Filmation was closing down, and at the same time we had Larry Niven trying to do an RPG with the Kazinti. So they're just like, you know what, for right now, let's just not use animated series stuff because we don't want to get into that whole mess of like who owns what and anything. So that was taken as, oh, it's not canon. It's like, no, it's just don't use it for a while. So I think a lot of things came together to become an urban legend that it was decanonized. Even if Gene didn't like it, he still can't decanonize it. That's like not how canon works.
So, he still cashed the paychecks. That's for sure.
Yeah, well, yes, and so did his lawyer, who was that was one thing we did find out at Roddenberry. He got like $1,500 for each episode or something.
Oh my god!
Back in '73, yeah, we're like, what did you do?
that's like $10,000 an episode today. That's a lot.
Yeah,
that's a lot. Jeez.
I think that what surprised me the most is that we learned how much involved DC Fontana was and how little she was actually given credit for. She would have been a showrunner today if that's what if they had that term then.
Yeah. So I wonder actually if you could talk a bit about like what in your research a bit about the writing process for the show, like what not for your book but for like the writers on the show itself, like what was it like to write on this animated series at the time, because it was a very unique situation for a lot of these guys.
Well, a lot of them worked on the original series, like David Gerald. And, David went in length talking about how it was hard to adapt at first. He was having really difficulty adapting, especially with the beats and the different breaks. And, you're writing, well, back then it was like 52 minutes of a drama. And now it was down to like 28, 27 minutes. And he was struggling with it. And he said, you remember talking to Dorothy about it? And she said, just write Star Trek. And whatever that meant to him, it just clicked a light bulb, and it worked for him then.
And also we had the writer's strike. The reason that we got all of these writers basically is that there was a writer's strike going on, and their union allowed them to do 1.5 hour animated script. So Dorothy just jumped on that and just contacted everybody that she knew that was, even vaguely involved with Star Trek or science fiction. So that's how we got Larry Niven.
Yeah, because they weren't paid much, as I recall, because animation just didn't pay much at the time. And ordinarily live action writers would have been like, no, exactly. I need to be working on other things that pay much more. But because of the writer's strike, they were like, sure. Because I think it was something like, it was under $2,000 or something like that for an episode. Like it wasn't much money, was it?
Yeah, I want to say like 1,700 or
17. Yeah,
something 2,000. It ranged, but yeah, exactly.
Herb Solo, I think it was Herb, turned her down because it didn't pay that much.
Yeah,
he just wasn't interested in writing something for animation.
Yeah, I know Gene Kuhn did too. Like he definitely turned her down as well.
Yeah.
It would be really interesting to see what that show would have been like had that writer's strike not happened. Like, would it be just been like, okay, we're happy it's disappeared into the darkness because it was really bad or silly, or who knows? It's very interesting.
Well,
I
you
think
talk a
Gene
little
may
bit
have
in
worked,
the. I'm sorry.
Gene may have
You,
worked a lot harder for those scripts.
Yeah.
you talk briefly in the book about the early idea of the show from Filmation itself, which was very different. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, we call it TAS 69 because it's just sort of like it was supposed to happen in 1969. It was going to run on Saturdays concurrent with the live action show. And it was basically Starfleet Academy. And each they were on a training ship called the Excalibur, and they were I don't know if Kirk and all those people were on the Excalibur as well, or if they were going to be like flying together or something. But basically, they each had a a person that was attached to them that they were teaching. So, Kirk had All-American Boy, whatever his name was. And, when this stuck out to us is that they had a Vulcan named Steve. We're like, that has to be wrong. Like, it has to be a placeholder, and somebody's just remembered it as like they just put it in there. But now it's just become, Steve the Vulcan. So we always like Steve. We put like a little dash in there somewhere.
Right. It has the S before the name. So it obviously there's that thing, right, where like all Vulcans either have to start with an S or like end with a T or something like that.
Right.
T, yeah.
And they had like a little fluffy creature thing because it's, of course you have to. And it was very much a what is it, Ploof or something like that? I can't remember.
Yeah.
It was very, very much a kiddie TV show. And they were like, no, we do not want to do that to Star Trek.
Well, I think what's so fascinating, like, about animation at the time, and a lot of people forget this now, but like you would have animated versions of live action TV shows quite frequently through the 70s and the 80s. I mean, where here we go.
Yeah, there's
a little bit of images right there for you.
Is that Steve?
No, that's the All-American Kirk.
It's the All-American guy, yeah.
Yeah.
So for the listeners out there, we're seeing Aaron's holding up the book right now, and we're seeing some rough sketches that were done for Filmation's pitch, I suppose, to Roddenberry and CBS about the early Starfleet Academy one. But Lisa, do you remember these days in animation where like you'd get like I don't know, you'd always have like the live action animated shows, like the Happy Days had an animated show, and there's like a Gilligan's
like the $6
Island.
Million Man and the Bionic Woman also have them?
They did.
No.
No,
I don't think they ever did. No.
Wow.
The Brady Kids were on. They had that.
I remember Emergency, I think, had an animated show.
Emergency +4.
Oh yeah,
which is a hospital show. People, it's a hospital
for kids. Yes, exactly. And the kids ran around and like the camping or something and helped somebody who fell down on the side of a hill and stuff like that. So it was like very. In fact, I think there's a brief image of that in one of the episodes, like used on the screen in the background. And there was also Lassie's Rescue Rangers, which was you could see Lassie and the two kids running, which is funny because that was an ABC show. I just realized that. I was like, oh wait, why is that on there? Today that wouldn't have happened, but they're in silhouette, so you can't really, you don't see detail. But yeah, that was funny.
Of course, like kind of the reuse of stuff over various shows. And like what was the other one? There was literally a Gilligan's Island in space show, which had all of the original cast back. And the concept was just like, we're just in space now. That's it.
They built a rocket to get off the island, and it just went way too far.
Like, what? Sure. As you do. I mean, that's just
the Happy Days one was a time travel show. They had like a time traveling jukebox or something like that. It was just like,
God.
It looked like the TARDIS. Actually, it was kind of funny. I
just love this because it's like, today, all these actors like try to posit like, oh, we care so much about content and the way our characters are. And then in this animated period, it was like, yeah, sure, we'll just time travel. It's fine. Who cares?
Oh, there was traveling in space. That was true. That were there. Yeah, everybody was in space for a while.
Yep.
It was great.
Yeah.
So the show's in production at this point. I mean, it's also though a very different kind of show. You're getting a lot of the original cast back. Unfortunately, we couldn't get all the cast back. Walter Koenig was not asked to return, although he would be asked to return for to write an episode. But I wonder if you talk a bit about like your research about just kind of the production process of the show.
As far as the voice cast goes, obviously everybody knows the story where they show up for the first day and it's Leonard and it's Shatner and DeForest and Jimmy Doohan and Magel, and Leonard gets there and is like, where's Joy and Nichelle, George and Nichelle? And, you know, we couldn't afford them. And he said, well, they're Star Trek, and if they're not doing it, I'm not doing it. And Fred Bronson was like, whoa, uh-oh, we don't have a show after all. And that's where the famous picture's taken, that because they were there and he wanted to get the picture in the paper. I guess he had press there that day. And, you know, I guess it was a month later, they ended up securing him. And he just said that, you know, they're Star Trek, you know, African-American, Asian-American, they really represent. And they were able to do more voices too. I'm still a little sour the fact that they didn't make it work for Walter. You know, they brought so many other speaking roles on. They probably wouldn't have had to pay him that much for an episode, you know, and they're drawing different characters anyway. You know, it's not like he
could have been on like a couple episodes even. They could have done that where, you know, you see Eric's most of the time and then he's on other times.
I just thought it was disappointing from that. I mean, I get why they, you know, they had a reason to have a different somebody at the console, and I understand that completely, but I just thought it was a little bit of a rub just because, you know, he was the only one that didn't come back for that.
And ironically, he wasn't supposed to be in the 1969 version either because he was too young. He would be a cadet himself. So they're like, no, we're not going to have him in. They're like, wow, this got shafted out of a show that didn't even happen. You know?
He'd be holding a toddler, a baby, you know, a newborn. Hey, this is how you work the console.
Well, so, I mean, we know that in Star Trek Phase 2, he came back as the chief security officer because we all know how that worked out, right? Right. Mm-hmm. He made such a career move after that.
So when you guys reviewed all the original, the animated series episodes, did you have a favorite?
No, it's like everybody. Well, I'm self-selecting Yesteryear out of that because that's the one that is really good that everybody loves. So I think besides that, the one thing that really stuck is like really Star Trek is one of our planets is missing because it's a giant space cloud. You know, we want to destroy it, but is it, you know, sentient? And everybody got something to do. Like Lieutenant Uhura helped build a device to let Spock talk to the, you know, it's like, so everybody had like a little bit to do. You saw the inside of a nacelle for the first time, which was kind of cool. But yeah, so for me, it's like, okay, this is Star Trek. So it might not be the most exciting or like fun, but to me, it's just like, oh, this encapsulated everything that show was.
For me, I mean, I absolutely loved Magix and Megas too. You know, because, you know, we learned the whole idea. The pitch was God, and, you know, and Gene always wanted to have God. And so, you know, NBC's like, whoa, we can't do God. We can't insult anybody, but you can do the devil. And, you know, I just loved how they did that with the character of Lucifer. He wasn't the devil. He was just a troublemaker. He was like Loki the cat. He was just a trickster. You know, and he had all these magic abilities. And then they tied in the people from Megas 2 into the Salem witch trials. And I just thought it was fascinating. And I loved that. And, you know, and just how, you know, by the end of the episode, Kirk's fighting for Lucifer. You know, so he's, you know, in theory, he's fighting for the devil, but he's not really the devil. I mean, the whole idea of the devil was this, you know, I'm lonely.
Misunderstanding.
Yeah. And I thought that was classic Star Trek too, because, you know, we defend, you know, just because he looks like that doesn't mean he's evil. And I just love that about the show. And they still got calls from the Bible Belt. Not as many as they probably would have received if it was God, but still, you know.
That's wonderful. It's fantastic. I have to say, I think mine is probably like the Beyond the Farthest Star, the very first episode. What I love about that is just, you know, the original series is hampered so much just by budget, you know, and just the limitations of live action at the time, which is not their fault. But then they did some wonderful stuff with that. But then you get to this animated series and suddenly the entire world just explodes outward. And you're getting this like ship that's, you know, millions of years old. And it's this massive,
that was an amazing ship.
It's just so beautiful. And you're just like, good God, this is awesome. And you're seeing a scope and so many of those, like the you know, the plates and the way that the backgrounds all look, it's like suddenly this is a huge world, and you get that awe of Star Trek that in many ways in the original series is always kind of left to your own imagination. Like they're talking about all these wondrous things, and you're kind of just left to think about them yourself. And there's a logic to that and a really cool element to that. But the animated series just completely explodes stuff outward in such a wonderful way.
And it's classic Star Trek.
Yeah.
And you know, it's a classic Star Trek story. It's like, and so lonely.
I know.
So
It kills you at the end.
Yeah. Like goodbye. Yeah, that's they need to like Lower Decks needs to come back to that or something. Just revisit them. And
it would be fun to do a crossover.
It would be.
Yeah,
that would be fun.
We've tried to pitch it basically, so I don't think it's gonna happen. Unfortunately, we are not part of any writers guild or anything like that, so we don't have any power. But there's also
Lisa and Peter for that. Lisa, Peter, get on that. Okay, you guys, you know.
No one's called me yet, so it's Lisa's.
They ask me all the time. What should we be doing with Star Trek, Lisa?
You had your little hotline phone, right? With the one with the red phone, like the Batman phone. Oh,
exactly.
There's even a background story about the ship really quickly, is that Gene gave no direction on what it was supposed to look like. And it started out as a older Starfleet ship, and it just kept changing and changing. And he was like, oh, make it organic. And it's like, okay, that would have been helpful, 500 iterations ago. But all of those ships that he worked on ended up in the time trap. It's all those things that are floating around in the graveyard of ships, basically. So
that does bring me to another question, because like what I think is really interesting about the animated series and live action, I guess too at the time, but like they would produce, I guess is the best way to say it. They would, like, as you say, they would do many ship designs, but also, like, in researching my own nonfiction book on Star Trek, which is getting a new release this spring. It's there would be even more scripts written than were being produced, and like season 2 famously has 6 episodes that were kind of leftovers, so to speak. And I know like Larry Niven had written like 3 other scripts that were rejected, or at least 3 other story treatments or things like that.
Yeah.
I wonder if in your own research, some of them were so dark. I want to see all of them. But I wonder if you could did in your research, did you come across any other story ideas that were ultimately rejected?
I don't remember.
I think in the Roddenberry archives we probably did, but they literally just had boxes that they were starting to organize. So I was seeing stuff from 1973, 75, 76. I'm like, this isn't even part of the animated series. I sort of helped them shuffle things out, like this doesn't belong here, this doesn't belong here. So we may have, but it was really hard to tell if it was like a component of some other story, or there was no like, oh, big script. There's a couple times we were like, I don't know this title, maybe that's for something. And I know we came across one of them on later got revealed. The Roddenberry Archives published it a couple years ago. I can't remember the title off the top of my head, but so there were a couple, and I think they've actually may have found another one. So it's kind of interesting. But those they didn't catalog anything, and there's no organizational that's hard. If Bob didn't exist, we wouldn't know anything.
It was difficult for us because our window was so short to actually be allowed to do research and produce. So there was a really big focus on what could we get, what could we verify. So, and there was only so many people around that could speak to the show.
Unfortunately, we lost 2 people who had passed away while we were waiting for the contract to be signed. So it's like,
we couldn't even interview them because we weren't allowed to talk about the book. We weren't allowed to do any of those things. So a lot of it was lost to time, unfortunately. But it's cool that Roddenberry and probably other places are unearthing some of those things. I mean, Gene and Majel were notorious for grabbing everything. And it was a time where people, and that's part of the difficulty with Roddenberry and CBS and the animated series is just, okay, they have it. Technically, it's CBS. CBS probably doesn't want to fight it. It's just not worth it. And, it's unfortunately why we couldn't really use it for the book.
And there's other stuff in the book that we wanted to do the thing with the novels and talk about the novelizations and how they were different from, and there's some really wacky changes in some of them because they didn't have the scripts to start with. They only had like basically a description of what was going on. And then they sort of retrofitted it later with some of the dialogue. But we just didn't have room. Like we were given specific size. So I've had people, it's like, well, this is a great book, but you seem to have forgotten blah, blah, blah. I'm like, no, we didn't forget it. We just couldn't put it in there,
We tended to try to focus, mostly on on the show itself and what was there, and try to reference some certain things. But because of the space, because, it's a visual book. So we needed to make sure that there was enough opportunities to put those things in. And, it's an animated show because you want to see those concept drawings. You want to see those ideas that came from fruition, from idea to fruition. So, yeah, there are certain things you have to just sort of cut. I mean, one of the biggest, I tend to not really pay attention to the feedback from, just because everybody's got something to say about stuff. And
that was just one person I noticed.
Yeah. One person, I think, Aaron drew my attention and I looked at it, and they were critical of the fact that we didn't interview any of the voice cast. I mean, the main actors. And that was our biggest regret. I mean, we really wanted to talk to Bill Shatner, but, CBS said, hey guys, there's no money. He's going to charge it. And, the only thing that, out of pocket.
Michelle, unfortunately, she was at that point, there wasn't much memory for her to talk about. So
we didn't really know what we could depend on. Because then it comes a case where she's misremembering things, and then you're getting attacked, or she's getting attacked for that. So, we went with, that's why I was fortunate that, Fred Bronson's press releases had some quotes from the show. I think George had a very mixed recollection, didn't really enjoy his time doing the animated show. And so and he probably would have charged us as well. And the only, expense wise, we actually pulled some of the money we were making and offered DC to write the forward. But for whatever reason, and I think, she was probably ill at that time. She wasn't really able to commit to it, and which we respected, we understood. And even the interview we did with her,
she did write.
She, and there were great responses, well thought out. You lose a little bit of the magic when you're talking one-to-one, either via the phone or video, but it was still so informative. Aaron paid for money out of his pocket the Ted Knight picture, and a couple other things. We sent copies of the book to everybody that we interviewed as a thank you. That came out of pocket. So, we did spend some money. We put it where we thought it was best used. And not that it wouldn't have been awesome to talk to William Shatner and George Takei and Nichelle Nichols. There just wasn't enough there to do it. And I don't know. I as much as
we got paid, but that didn't really, we kind of was still at a loss in some ways. I think CBS even saw it the same way. It's like, we're doing this book for the love of the series, not necessarily to make a boatload of cash. So, which was nice that they actually still did it.
Yeah, so I don't think that we lost anything by not having them in the book. I don't know what they could have added differently. We've got some really great stories from William Simpson when he was recording Young Spock, which was just awesome. Some of the surviving writers, Larry Niven,
who had director from second season.
So it'd been interesting what we would have had to cut out if we got William Shatner talking about it, which I'm sure he would have given us.
I think those little stories actually help make what the show was like. Oh, I see where that came from, and this is that little bit, okay, as opposed to like, yes, I came into the studio and recorded, or I recorded on the road. It's like a generic sort of cast question response or something.
It wasn't like their experiences on the original series where they would sit down and rework the script with the writers and Gene and things like that. So there wasn't as much of that kind of process for those gentlemen and Michelle to do.
And Walter was not happy with the revision process with Gene anyway. That was hilarious. He's just like, that almost ended my writing career at the same time it started it. I think for
people can sometimes forget too that, like, you know, these actors, I mean, this was a long time ago now, and for these actors,
Yeah.
they were doing many other things at the time.
You remember what you were doing 50 years ago and on a Tuesday or whatever? It's like, yeah, no, like,
yeah, no, it's like I don't even remember what I did last week, and it's just
Right.
like it's the for them, this was a job. Many of them recorded very quickly. There's I think the famous story of Shatner literally recording a captain's log when he was in his car on like an 8-track
Yeah.
or something. Like, it was very, you know, they were just fitting it in when they
I
could.
think they mailed them like tape decks and stuff like that for them to use on the road.
Yeah.
Well, there's the one episode, I don't remember which one it was, but you can, the voice volume, the volume of his captain's log to start the episode, and then you could tell it was done
Is that the
somewhere in the
Territon
car.
incident?
I don't remember. I
wonder.
think it might have been.
Okay.
It's been so long since I've been watching.
Yeah.
But it was just funny. Like, okay, that's where he was in a closet or in the car or somewhere weird, and they had to.
Which is hilarious because Lower Decks, they've recorded all of their stuff in closets and stuff for a while because it's because of the pandemic. But of course, the technology now is just completely different. Yeah.
I have to imagine too, because they would release trailers for their new episodes, and yet Shatner in those always sounds very, like, I imagine those were the on the run recordings as well, because they just sound a little less polished than some of the other ones.
It's kind of interesting. I think when we look back, it's not so much an acting job for them. It's almost like they're doing marketing. It's like, okay, we have to keep Star Trek going, so we're going to read these things, and now we're done. And it's almost like a commercial. So I think that was
and that was Roddenberry's justification for it at the time, wasn't it? Is that, like, we want a movie, we want a live action show back. This is a way to keep the public interested. And it's interesting to hear about how all the actors too were very engaged with Star Trek publicity for years after the show ended. Which today you're just like, that sounds funny, you know, like, but these guys were just going all over the country just to go to like local stations and promote Star Trek. Which is,
I met Nichelle Nichols at a furniture store when it was a brand new furniture store opening. I'm like, wow, that really does happen, because you see that in TV shows where somebody's in like a shopping mall or something. It's like it
Galaxy Quest.
Yeah, right.
Totally.
Oh my God. That's amazing.
So what was the initial critical response to the animated show? Was it popular?
Well, right before it came out, when they were showing stuff at conventions, it was mostly positive, but then there's like, it's essentially today. It's like somebody was running ads in a newspaper to stop the animated series because it wasn't real Star Trek, and it would damage the ability for them to have a new TV show or a movie, because it would ruin the reputation of Star Trek. And some people were just, you know, they were handing out petitions to sign to like stop it. But then you had the people who were just really in love with it and started doing fanzines. And I think once it came out, people kind of calmed down, because it wasn't like a kid's show. It was more of a
Star Trek,
all ages.
Yeah, they did Star Trek. I mean, it was all ages, but a lot of it was, you know, it was heavy content. And when I mean heavy, it's just kids had to think.
Well, I mean, you have a death of a pet on a Saturday morning show. It's like that, it wouldn't normally happen.
Yeah.
So I mean, it was interesting with those kind of ideas. And I mean, the mud episode, that to me is still crazy that got done. I mean, it's a lot. You know, she's drugging Spock. It's, you know, 2 episodes earlier, they have Uhura taking charge of the away team and going down to the plant, the Lorelei signal, and getting the men out. And then 2 episodes later, you know, they've got Majel Chapel drugging Spock and to make him love her. And, you know, everything they do is demeaning women. So it's just like all the progress they made, they just threw out the window. So that was pretty hilarious. And that was like, it was really the only one that I think was glaring. And I think they had another one where there was a little flirtation between Kirk and an alien. So I mean, but other than that, I mean, it was tight Star Trek. I mean, I think in some ways the animation series, especially the 3rd season, was stronger. The stories were stronger, and it was, you know, you didn't have like extraneous things. Everything had, you had to keep it moving, and everything had to have a purpose. You know, the devil was in the details. So that was really cool. And I think, you know, fans realized that this is Star Trek. You know, we're getting the same writers, you know, DC's running it. Gene's involved in it. We got the voice actors, you know, so we're not ready. You know, Filmation, you know, has that some like Gilligan's Island in space, the Brady Kids cartoon. So there were so many goofy things that it's understandable if fans probably got scared in the beginning. But I mean, remember, Next Generation also received a lot of pushback.
Yeah, it did.
The local radio
station doesn't have Spock. It doesn't have me.
There's a local radio station in Philadelphia, and I remember the one disc jockey in the morning show just spent the whole episode railing against the fact that Picard was bald. Wait, we haven't cured baldness in the future, and it was, this is Philadelphia, so you'd think like, okay, we're a little bit more advanced than that. No, it was hilarious. So, and obviously Next Gen took a little bit to find its legs, and thank goodness it was able to. But the animated series hit the ground running. It's like you said, Peter, like that first episode, and you got to see so much more than you could have at that time in television production.
You did, yeah. Speaking of which,
how about the response to the new characters, to like Eric and what was the cat's name again?
Ress.
Thank you.
I think people really like those characters. I mean, especially the Cation, I think she kind of inspired a lot of more fan fiction, and we saw Cations throughout live action Star Trek going forward into the future. So I mean, obviously Eric's is cool, but he would be very hard to do up until now. So it'd be cool if we saw him in like Strange New Worlds or something like that, because they're very long-lived species too. So
and even with that race, that would be cool.
Yeah.
Bob Klein's story about doing Eric's is great, because he got to draw one of them, and he got to draw Eric's, and he was so excited about that, to be able to draw this alien creature with a third limb coming out of its chest, and a third appendix from the back. And it was just, and that was like, for me, a lot of the joy of writing the book was listening to those stories and how excited and that enthusiasm 45 years later was still coming out. Bob was a big Star Trek fan too. I mean, it was part of the problem with Beyond the Farthest Star. He's thinking Star Trek, nacelles, has to look like a Federation ship, and Gene's never saying anything until like, 3 years later. Oh, it's got to be organic. And Fred Bronson, I still love the Moviola story, where he's going to watch it with standards and practices. If you'd watch it on the Moviola, before it aired, just so S&P could take a look, make sure everything's okay. And there was this one notorious scene where the animators, to see if they could catch him, put a yellow string from McCoy staring at a pond in the sequel to Shore Leave, and it looks like he's peeing. And Fred actually caught it and said, you might want to take a look at this. And they did it on purpose, but he didn't catch it the first time. Imagine that if that made it to TV. Granted, 1970s 13-inch black and white, you might not have caught it. But when those DVDs came out, that would have been something.
Or even the laser discs. They were it was the first series to be completely released on a video of format of some kind. So it was like, you can still get like the laser disc. It's really cool looking.
That's fun. I had no idea. I remember the VHSs that were hard to find when I was looking for them, but like I had no idea it came out on laser.
And then 2005, I think, is when the DVD came out. It was a really cool case, and that's one of my favorite Star Trek cases that they've done the media with. It just looks techie, and it's kind of cool.
It does, yeah. And the Blu-ray set's very nice too. They have like the kind of postcard posters of each of the episodes, which is great. Speaking of the limitless limitations of the animated series in many ways, one thing we wanted to talk about on this panel was kind of our favorite aliens that were premiered or continued in the animated format. But I know, Aaron, I think you have like a little show and tell thing to show us here.
Oh, yeah.
Talk about
one of the aliens that. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Please go ahead.
No, one of the aliens that I really liked is the Dramians, or Dramen, depending on where in the script they say it. And they sort of look like super jacked giant Ferengi. They have like this very similar head shape and stuff like that. I feel like they were maybe a species related at one time and then just separated over time. But I have this big board, and this is what it actually looks like when it was finished. And then it's just a bunch of iterations of like what they did to build up that.
That's amazing. So
we're first one is like really weird.
Yeah, we're seeing like the evolution of the character design as it's progresses from initial sketch to kind of a finished form.
It's on a giant board and very unwieldy.
But it looked like the first sketch had multiple legs, and kind of almost like a centipede.
Yeah.
But then it pops up into more of a, I don't know, maybe a ferret.
It's almost like the evolution of man drawing in some ways. Right.
That's amazing. And as I recall, too, the creatures were very tall in the episode.
Yeah, 7 feet tall. If you watch, one of the characters has to duck down in the door going through the corridor on the Enterprise.
Yeah, which is something fun of the animated series too. Is you could have creatures that were really tall or really short, or any number of different designs, because you could do whatever, right?
Yeah, that must have been so much more fun to write the aliens as pretty much anything in the universe, as opposed to something that you can make up for a person, or very primitive CGI like a Species 8472.
Oh yeah.
But but it would have been great to be able to have a 7-foot tall alien.
But Lisa,
Species 8472 has legs kind of like Eric's, actually.
It does, yeah. The 3 appendages. Lisa, I'm always curious though, like what of the Trek aliens you've written for, what's your personal favorite?
Well, I think I have a soft spot for Vulcans. Yeah. Because I kind of aspire to be a Vulcan myself. And so and it was always really fun to write for Tuvok. Because it was so subtle. It wasn't like over the top dramatic, and like big broad emotions. It was always, what is he not saying? What emotion would he be feeling, if he would allow himself? And I always find that an interesting challenge to write for.
Lisa, what did you think about writing for him I always thought it was interesting that he was the security chief on the ship, because I never would have thought like a Vulcan as a security chief. And I thought that was a really cool sort of dichotomy. So how did you like writing that?
I really like that because he was so different from Worf, for example. This was somebody who did not want to fight, who would really much rather talk through differences and come to a nice logical solution, but then when they were attacked, by some other alien and he had to, spring forward, Vulcans are stronger than people, and, he would be very effective, in that he wouldn't be feeling fear. He wouldn't be battling, disgust or terror or anything like that. It would just be, what's the most effective way to defend ourselves?
All right. And I know this is not a Voyager podcast, but I have to ask one more question. Tuvix, yes? No.
No.
I think Janeway did the right thing. that is my official position.
I'm to the point where it's like, I wish that episode never existed, not because I didn't like the episode, because I just never want to hear that conversation again.
I gotta be honest.
I agree with you, Lisa.
So I love throwing it out there, because you could go either way, honestly. So it's just so much fun to just like, I just throw a smoke grenade into the room and then run out and then just watch everybody. Peter, what was your favorite alien from the animated show?
I also like the Dramians. They're great. I love the Tribble Killer. I just find that
Glommer.
Yeah, the Glommer was
the Glommer. Yeah,
in the room. Look,
that amazing. There it is. Yeah.
Oh, look at that.
Oh God,
I
need to get that. Where did you find that? Like, I need to.
Amazon at the time.
Amazon.
It might. I don't know if they're still making them, but I would check there or.
Yeah, that's a good size. That's a solid.
And it's got like a little a pink Tribble inside of it you can take out. So.
Oh my God, that's so cool.
Well, we talk about animation, and the Tribble episode. I mean, they didn't really do anything. So now the animated episode, you can have a Glommer go after the Tribbles. That's not something they could have done in the animated show. I mean, unless you're going to dress up a dog like they did in the. I forget what episode it was. Enemy Within. Yeah, Enemy Within. Mm-hmm. When he split personality, because
Yeah. Rich, how about for you? Like, what's your favorite?
Oh man, there's so many cool ones. I gotta be honest with you. It's hard to narrow them down. The Felosians are awesome.
Felosians are great.
I love them.
The Vendorians are pretty cool too.
Vendorians are awesome. I mean, that's our first shapeshifter.
Yeah.
And that's another great story about Star Trek, where they're not judging that appearance. They're judging the worth of the individual.
But this is kind of for the listeners, that's like the squid looking alien that is still like able to shapeshift into anyone you want, and which is just
or a
really
table.
Cool. or table. Yes.
Hey, was that second biobed there? I mean, I don't remember seeing that there. But I think at
that
the
line
end,
should have gone to McCoy, by the way, or to Spock, one of the two, not to Kirk.
100%. I really liked the Kazinti. I know it's a little maybe heretical just because it was, not technically an original Star Trek alien, but that episode was awesome. Those characters were awesome. The way Spock manipulated the situation, and I just thought that they were really cool. I really enjoyed seeing them. It's a shame we didn't get any more Kazinti episodes, because I think that would have been awesome. Like the Kazinti Human War would have been
on the Enterprise.
really cool.
Yeah. That's I agree. And it's also the only Star Trek episode of the original series that doesn't feature Kirk. And which is, I think, is fun, and I think it's it really is a good episode for Sulu. I think it's a great episode for him, and
Uhura too, just like Uhura, because like she has to play dumb essentially, and then she's just like, I don't want to do this. It's like,
that's fantastic. It's it's I guess as we're getting near to the end of the hour here, we should start wrapping things up. But what's new for you guys? What's on the horizon? What's coming down the pipe?
Aaron, you can go ahead with this first.
I have a comic book cover from IDW coming out next month for Strange New Worlds. I've got something else I can't talk about. Trying to think of what else do I have? I think that's right now. I think that's it. I'm doing a couple other comic book covers for the new show, the Echoes, the one that just came out that's set in the motion picture era. So I'm doing one there. So
I'm looking forward to reading that comic.
Yeah,
I'm looking forward to that one.
It is interesting. I think that right now that's it right now that I can say.
Awesome.
For me, it's weird. It's really what inspiration I find. And I did have a pitch I was working on. I was really excited about. I guess I can talk about it now. It doesn't really matter. On the Rocketeer, Dave Stevens and the Rocketeer.
That's awesome.
And I was, compiling. I was researching, compiling interviews, and it was this really great thing because a lot of the comic magazines from back in the day, Comics Journal, Back Issue, instead of writing stories, they just wrote the transcripts of these interviews with Dave, and they were awesome. And his sister finally created Rocketeer Trust and started getting out in public. And I reached out to her and I was like all excited. I'm like, this is it. I talked to her and I can get this book going. I can pitch it and, get it made. Which I thought it would be, something that was really special. And she couldn't do the interview because they already had projects in place. She said it would be a conflict of interest. And I was so distraught. I was downtrodden because I was just like so excited. But I understood the marketplace could not afford to do two books on Rocketeer. And it turns out some of the research that I found was they did a comic last year called The Great Race, and they committed 6 to 8 pages in the back telling these stories. So it was really cool that a lot of that information's out there. That I was glad that it's out there. I think I may try to pitch it to one of the Tomorrow's publishing. They do comic publications. What wasn't out there, but that was really it. I'm actually looking at a couple sports things now, but I'm not really like pigeonholed into one genre or anything like that. I started out my career in college athletics, my writing career. So going back to that a little bit now and just seeing what sticks. At least, and Peter, you guys know, especially, and obviously Aaron and I know from our book, it's you pitch what's going to sell. So you don't want to put too much work into something. You want to get that pitch idea. But taking the lessons from what Aaron and I did to produce the animated series book, I wanted to do a little bit of that for the Rocketeer book, just because it was such a cool character. So that's
I would have loved to have designed that too. That would have been
I was looking to do a cover. You're the call. Trust me, you were the call. I told my wife, I said, Aaron's got to do this cover.
I love the Rocketeer.
I was really excited about the potential for everything with it. But it just didn't happen. So it's, you move on. And at least in Peter, you guys probably know that really well as also. But that's really it. So I wish I had more to talk about in regards to that. I just don't, it was just, I mean, if at the end of the day, the only book I ever published or ever worked on is the animated series book, I got to do something that was really special. I got to work with somebody that was really special and talented. I think at the time, Aaron and I were like,
yeah,
but,
yeah,
and that was just, it was the stress of having 4 months to produce it and things like that. And, but looking back on it now, it was so like I said, I got to contribute a little piece to this franchise that I adore.
Yeah. Well, and Lower Decks told it they used the book as like as their reference for TAS. So
oh yeah,
which is
which Mike McMahon came up to me like during a premiere. It's like, oh, I say, bring me the book, and they bring like that's really cool. So yeah, that was amazing.
That's the greatest compliment. In my mind. So yeah, it was a pretty unique opportunity, and I feel very fortunate, lucky, and blessed. And Kevin Toyama, I said his name earlier. I really wish when Weldon Owen got sold, he ended up being laid off. And our new editor was really sweet and very nice. But, Kevin would have been a partner on the book. And I think, Aaron, we probably would have, as good as it was, as good as people think it was, I think it could have been 100 times better in that regard. Yeah. And, he had a real passion for the animated series.
I was going to say, he would have lobbied for us to get either more book pages or something, it's like,
And Mike Johnson. I mean, I remember calling Mike.
He's the one who actually pitched it to John Van Sitters. So I think he, or helped with that. So
Mike would go into John's office and say, I want to read this book. We got to make this book. I mean, so even before he had the pitch in his hand, he knew about it, which was awesome. So they were really the two people that, I really appreciated, getting to that point.
Well, that's amazing. We are just about out of time here. I wanted to give you guys a chance to throw out any socials you want to promote, or and also tell the audience where they can pick up the book.
You can pick up the book, hopefully, if you can try and find it at your local comic book shop or something, just support them. But you can get it on Amazon, Walmart, Target, I think are the 3 big ones. But you can find me at Geek Filter on Instagram and Twitter, while Twitter's still there. And I am eventually rebooting my podcast, Drawn to Trek, which is an animated series podcast or animated Star Trek podcast. So that's coming back. I just don't know exactly when.
Awesome.
I'm not really on social media. So
you're probably the smart one.
Rich is exactly. Rich is the smart one.
It was funny because I was off it when we wrote the book, before we wrote the book. I came back on after the book was released, but not because of the book. And then, I got out again. It's just,
it's a place. It's a place. That's all we can say about it. But
I did see our book in the wild, though. I was so happy. Barnes and Noble was sitting there, so that was pretty cool.
Nice.
That's awesome.
Yeah, somebody sent us a picture of it in Thailand in a bookstore.
Oh wow, that's really cool. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, and for my money, I mean, it's a fantastic book, and based on what I've heard today, I would hope that maybe we can get a second edition one day and double the size and get some more in there, because that'd be fantastic.
That'd be great.
So for audience out there, thanks for joining us. Thanks for being here. Thank you to the Virtual Trek Con again for inviting us to be part of the show. If you'd like to get in touch with us, our podcast again is the Treksperts Briefing Room. Ordinarily, we do like commentaries for specific episodes. We just did one that was fantastic about the season 3 premiere of Star Trek Picard, which was a lot of fun with author Ryan Britt. And we do a bi-weekly schedule where we have often, most of the time, screenwriters, but we'll also have experts in the field, actors, and anyone who, all sorts of Star Trek awesomeness happens over at the briefing room. Our Twitter feed is Treksperts BR, if you'd like to connect with us on there. And we're also on Instagram at just search the Treksperts Briefing Room. And we're part of the Inglorious Treksperts podcast network, I suppose. And want to thank Mark A. Altman and Darren Dockman for that. And again, thank you for the Virtual TrekCon. So I suppose for Lisa Klink and myself, we'll say thank you very much for being here. And until next time, the briefing room is now closed.